my problem is sometimes I'll just be like, I'll just get so into like working in a sketchbook that it will just take me away from making a painting, like a bigger painting that I've been working on. And I'll be like, oh, there went the whole day, just kind of going through which isn't a bad thing at
Yeah, I
all.
think it's necessary, I think as artists, it's important for us to maintain our happiness
Yeah.
because it's only then that we can really truly be free to create. And
Yeah.
I think taking a tangent like that is like taking a breath. All right, here we go. With me today, I discovered him as W.V. Guerin on Instagram. Was mesmerized by the work, so check out that account for sure. Check out his work at wvguerin.bigcartel.com.
Right. Yep.
And Fort Guerin is here with us today. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, man. It's great to be able to do this with you. I'm interested to learn a little bit about your art too. Um, I've gotten a real kick out of seeing, especially the baseball card stuff.
Yeah.
That so there's something about that genre, or just the color of those like 70s, 80s baseball cards, and even the really early stuff. So I've enjoyed seeing a lot of your work pop up on the Instagram also. So it's
Yeah,
good to
that
be able to sit down and talk art with you, man.
well, that retro thing is it's big to my aesthetic. And that's what drew me into what you do. Because I felt like I was watching a Western. And
Yeah,
yeah,
the, I go back with the artwork to has a real nostalgic feel for me. Like I'm looking at your background. You got I see the Darth Vader in the background um, on one of your paintings, and there's something about going back to your youth, kind of that age of innocence, and the imagery is so great too from those time periods, like from the 50s kind of on. You get you get that fun imagery, the bright colors of the old Western comic books and everything, um, along with kind of that washed out color too that you get with the old comic books, and that goes the same with the old baseball cards, kind of
yeah.
that faded those faded primary colors that pop up in there. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's been amplified in pandemic times. The the look towards nostalgia, just everything, like the collectibles market. But that has seeped in. The more I look at it, the more I realized how much that has seeped into actual art, and hence the art that's being collected.
Yeah, I don't.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about that. I mean, we could all, and this might just be coming from like an artist perspective of it, because we could all go online and start actually collecting baseball cards, or collecting the old Star Wars figures, or the old magazines. I just kind of like, first of all, it gets expensive. It gets
Yeah,
expensive when you start clicking on some of those links to see how much they want, and I just kind of get a lot more joy out of just kind of painting them. I don't know why it is. And
yeah,
kind of just sitting down and just going down the rabbit hole of clicking through images, looking for cowboys to paint, or there's, I think it's one of the National Archives where you can literally like click through the entire magazines. Um, I can't think of the website off the top of my head, but they just have hundreds of comic books on there, and you can literally click through them. It's kind of crazy, because when I first started, I'm originally from Arizona, and we had moved from Arizona out to DC, and we had a comic book store down the road from us here, right in town. And I would go down there and dig through his old comic books and find the Western ones, obviously. And I don't know if it was a craving for home, wanting to with the missing Arizona, and are
That
you in
that's
you're in
I'm
Fort
in
Worth, right?
I'm in between Fort Worth and Dallas and Bedford. It's called the Mid Cities,
Okay.
and so we're a cluster of little cities. But yeah,
Okay.
but no, hearing where you're from. I think it's so funny because what the places we come from, how it seeps into the work that we do.
Yeah, and I didn't. I started listening to country music when I moved out here. I don't know if it was because I was missing Arizona and the desert, and I just started for some reason. And cowboys had never been in my artwork before, and they just started showing up. And I would go down there, and the old pulp. He always had boxes of the old pulp dime novels, which the covers are really cool on all those. So I would just go down there, dig through those, and they started just working their way into my work over that was probably about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, and then
Well, that it's a radical. How long ago did you move?
we like about over 20 years now that we moved out here to DC.
It, but it's a radical shift in landscape and scenery because
Yes. Yeah, for,
when I
for
when I
sure.
visited Arizona, I'm like, wow, this looks like the cartoons I watched when with Wile E. Coyote and stuff. Like I didn't, that it exists, but being in it, it's different,
It's
and
different.
living in it, it would,
Yeah,
yeah,
when we lived in Phoenix, I would have friends that would come out, or people that I worked with that had moved from the East Coast, and they literally would be like, "Wow, I felt like I was landing on a planet." When I moved out here, like when they flew into Phoenix, Arizona, coming from the East Coast, would be like, "Wow, this is just dirt and rock." And I'm like, "Yeah." So I had the reverse when we moved out here with trees
yeah.
and seasons and snow and everything.
I
But it
think
does, it does. You long for where you come from.
I remember I had a friend who I think they lived in, I want to say New Hampshire, and so a friend of his from Arizona went there, and they're on their lawn, and he's staring, and he's like, "Wow, it's like there's grass everywhere." And the guy is like, "Yes."
It is.
You
It's
know?
crazy. I did, and trees, like it. Because when I met my wife, she moved from Ohio and from DC when we first met, and she moved out to Arizona for 2 years. She's like, "Well, describe it for me." And I'm like, "Well, you can see for miles. You can go outside and just look and see, out into the to the landscape, as opposed to where
Yeah.
she grew up. You just saw trees. You couldn't see anything else on the horizon line except for trees. So yeah, it's a little bit of a different
So, how long have you been making art?
this gets okay. So we were talking a little bit before this about the photography. I
Mhm.
started, I think, like a lot of us do, with the art classes in like high school. And I started actually as a photo major in college, and then switched to sculpture and graduated with a sculpture degree. And then found out once I was done with college that sculpture takes a lot of space and a lot of equipment to produce. Um, and that's when I started painting. So that was, geez,
You very
30.
much gave a good view into the artist mind there.
Yeah.
Well,
Easy.
I went to do this, and then I ended up doing
Yeah, it
some
was.
other thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I actually started when I was younger. I liked to write, and in fact, it was what was encouraged a lot. I always drew and everything, but I thought I was going to be a writer, and
Okay.
then that just wasn't immediate enough for me. And that's how I got into photography. And then that turned into a computer thing. And then
Okay.
that's where I was like, well, I'm going to use my hands again, and and here we are.
So you started with photography, and then you jumped into to the computer. Okay,
Well,
into the
because I
computer
started in a
field.
dark room. Yeah, I
Yeah,
started
and
in a dark room, and then everything went digital, and I realized that I was in an office most. I do the shoots, but then man, like editing and all that, and I just
yeah,
wasn't.
it's all computerized now.
I got depressed really. Like I'm like, oh my god, what have I? This isn't what I worked for. And then I've collaborated with a friend of mine on a painting project, and then I remembered what that felt like,
Okay,
and then I just kind of dumped that photography career, and
yeah, because
that yeah,
photography you can really end up down like a commercial, into the commercial aspect of it, and it becomes like real legit, like work,
yeah.
like you were saying.
I was always able to separate that because there was my personal work and then there was the gig.
Uh-huh.
Um, and but just the fact that it was digital, it lost its magic for me. You know,
There's something about putting that piece of paper in the tray, and watching
yeah,
sloshing it up and down, and watching the image,
yeah. And then,
slowly
but
appear on the
and then the other
paper.
part of me is like, well, there's no reason to really do that because, especially now, it's like I still use photography. I love my iPhone. I take, and it takes magnificent pictures. I used to carry a lot of gear to get some of the images that
It,
I get now.
yeah,
It's nuts.
when we moved to DC, I cleaned carpets for 11 years out here in DC. That was my day job, and it was an interesting job because we kind of did we cleaned the carpets of we took care of the White House and the vice president's residence, and all the the upper class of the DC area. So it was an interesting job. But I went to a house once to clean. He was a professional photographer, this guy, and he literally was sitting in his studio office, and it was a huge room, and there was just a desk in there, and he goes, I built this was the studio of my dream. I built this thinking I was going to have my dark room set up on the one side over here, and where I would take my photos over here, and the lighting and everything. And he goes, now I'm just sitting in this giant room with a computer and a printer. And he was like, it all just went away like overnight. Like there was no.
My story like that is I used to have big cases to transport my lights and my equipment for the big shoots, and then within yeah, what happened is I went to a store, bought. I remember my friend saying, what are you doing? That's like $200 worth of painting materials." And I said, "I'm going to paint." And and then yeah, a few months later, that case that housed the really expensive equipment was full of paint, and that's what I would take to live paint. And that it was weird. It was just I just really literally chunked that career out of the way.
It was just.
And I was kind of revered. Like people thought it was very strange, but it made sense to me. So,
To stop photography completely.
well, because I always saw it, especially the way I composed. It was painting.
Yeah.
Um, so translating that into doing that with brushes and paint and or whatever mixed media, it just made sense, and all of it made sense. And um I'm used to being called crazy, so that's okay.
That was all right with me. So I just went with it.
Something I love in your work is your color palette. Is that something you're conscious of, or is it just those are the colors you gravitate towards? But
Yeah,
there's a
it's Um, when I first started painting, I think I was probably like a lot of people because I never took a painting class per se in college. I took life drawing and all your prerequisites for art. If you get an art degree, there's a lot of art history in there, and then you got your life drawing, and there's a lot of intro classes till you get to your. And so my emphasis was sculpture, so I never had painting as a class that I took. So I had to teach myself to paint, and that's still questionable how well of a job I did teaching myself how to
Oh,
paint.
I think it's fantastic work.
Well,
Like I love it.
thanks.
And yeah.
So
I
when I
I think it's
started,
about having your own imprint, and you definitely have your own. That's what stood out to me,
yeah, well,
or
thanks.
still stands out. Yeah.
So when I did start painting, I would go down to the art store and be like, I'm going to paint in oils, and you can rack up a receipt pretty quick with art supplies, and I didn't know how to paint. I started just using tempera, which is the cheapest paint
Yeah.
that you can buy, because when I would use expensive materials, I'd be like, okay, this is money going out the door, and I don't have the skill set to get what's in my head onto paper yet. So I just started using just real basic stuff. And now I still use tempera cakes, just like the kids use in kindergarten. The same things, and it gives it a real kind of chalky kind of look to it. And then I also just go to the Home Depot and we'll buy they always have those sample bottles that are.
I love oops paint. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like $1.25. I'm like, I'll take all those and then mix up the colors that I do need.
What made me really comfortable with that was going. I saw a Picasso exhibit, and I've seen a few, I guess, but this one I was looking at the materials on the tags, and it said house paint. It's like, well,
Oh,
if it's good enough for Picasso,
well,
like,
that's
yeah.
I've always been a fan of Ansel Kiefer, the German artist, and he was the same way with the house paints and stuff. And he would do these giant, huge monumental size paintings. And I can remember going to like the Chicago Art Institute, and they literally had like 2 feet in front of it roped off, and just where the paint was falling off of it onto the floor, because he was just using like layers of house enamel, and it was just like slowly falling off the
That's funny.
the uh the paint. Yeah, you just, like you said, you saw it and you're like, oh, I would have never thought that he was just using.
Yeah. I think at that point I had been, kind of conscious and worried, and it's like, well, you need to cut that out. Like, you
So
know,
we
fi-
you said so you were into writing at the
uh,
beginning. And what do you still practice writing at all, or write, or have
I
any
don't
aspirations for?
I don't really do any creative writing. It's too slow of a medium for me. I'm glad that I started there. What would happen is I remember as early as first, second grade, I would get papers back, and it was at that early age, teachers saying you have such a great voice,
Uh-huh.
and that remained, I think, consistently nurtured. And so it was, and it's what got me my grades in school, the fact that I could write, and then
Okay.
that turned into speaking, and um I realized all along it was always expression. It's just like, well, what do I do with this? And putting it into, a 200-page book, and hoping somebody takes the time to read that was just aggravating to me. So
Yeah.
because I have plenty to say. so yeah, now I just daily make things and express that way.
Okay, yeah, because I use a lot of text in my
Mhm.
paintings. On some of the larger, especially the larger pieces, will just be filled in with writing in the background. And I would love to be a writer, but like you said, it's choosing a medium to work in. Because I'd spent so long trying to get to where, like I was talking about, where you had the idea in your head and to be able to put it down onto paper. And then I'm like, gosh, these writers, all they need is just paper and a pencil, and they can create this amazing work. And I'm like, it's a lot of work when you really sit down to think about writing. So I was like, all right, I'll just put my ramblings into my paintings. So that's why I do use a lot of text in the pieces. That's my frustration with not being able to be a writer. I guess you could say.
Yeah. Well, it's still when I do, I'll do funny things with text. I'll scramble the words, and I enjoy doing that type of thing. And I think that's kind of the lit major in me, to just
Okay.
mess with the placement of things and make people work to look
Uh huh.
visually kind of
Is
kind of making them work still the way they would have if they would have had to read what I had to say.
okay. Is it? Did you get your degree then in literature?
Yeah, I got a bachelor in literature, one in philosophy. I went through photography school at the same time. Then I got a master's in literature, and that's where I
Okay.
stopped. I said I'm not reading Chaucer anymore. So,
Okay. What? I mean, so you were deep into it then with the if you were getting your
it
master's degree.
well, it's funny because I when it got into the master's program, um, was already I already had a photography career, but so the teacher asks the classroom, "Why are you here?" And everybody is answering. It's like, yeah, I want to go to this school and that school, and I want to teach, I want to do this, and so she gets to me, and I say, well, I can't stop reading, and that was, and she laughed and she said, "That's a great answer." Yeah. Because yeah, that was the fact. I still read quite a bit. Back then it was more fiction,
Okay.
but I mean I would yeah, I kind of still devour books.
I, um.
Lately it's more like I'm reading about marketing and stuff, but yeah, through my life I had a fiction phase, a nonfiction. I like biographies and that type of thing a lot.
Okay. Yeah. No. I love books.
Yeah.
I've got collections of books, and I'm the same way. I'll go through a phase where I'm reading fiction. I tend to tend to go towards more of the nonfiction stuff as I get older. I don't.
I think that's a thing, isn't it? Like
I don't know.
I used to be all about fiction, um and then I had this class in the master's program, and it was literary theory.
Okay.
And so one of these theories was breaking down language, and by the end of it I'm like, my god, language is meaningless. And I I had this weird existential moment, and I just couldn't read fiction ever again. It's like I don't trust it.
Wow.
And that sounds so weird, but it's true. It's like I never had the connection to fiction again.
Oh
So
wow. It's
I'm glad that I had that long affair with it, because I was yeah, it's my early 20s, but that's when
that's for yeah.
I don't know. Rest in peace fiction for me.
That's rough, Sergio. There's some good stuff out there still.
I'm sure, but I'm much more drawn to biographies, or biographies are big. I love
Okay.
biographies.
Now, do you read
Um,
them? here's the great debate I always have with my dad. He reads them all over the place. He'll start the beginning, jump to the middle, jump to the end. I tend to read them from front to back,
Yeah,
but
that's front to
usually,
backs.
okay, he just reads them like he's watching like a documentary and like fast forwarding through sections of them when he reads them.
It's very cinematic of him.
Yeah,
I, I love that.
but my problem with the biographies is always the like the first three chapters of the breakdown of the family history usually seems to drone on a little bit, and I do as I and this maybe just this is like old man
That
type talking. I'll
yeah,
peruse through some of like the family histories.
that's very true. It's especially I think books that are that have a ghostwriter.
Okay.
Yeah, and those are autobiographies, but um, it's funny because the I read a lot of wrestling ones because I
Okay.
man some interesting lives. But the one guy Mick Foley
Hmm.
talked about the process of them assigning him a ghostwriter, and
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 he writes a ton of books, right?
yeah, yeah,
McFoley.
prolific
And
writer.
yeah, because I've
Just
heard him
yeah,
on.
does it all in a notebook. It really cool books. But the very first one I think was just him breaking down his exchange with the ghostwriter, and so he
Okay.
excerpted a piece of the intro that the guy had written, and it sounded weird compared, having read Mick Foley's actual voice. It sounded weird because yeah, it was very. I grew up in a small town. It was yeah, that very perusable um opener.
Yeah, I've found because I'll every couple years I'll go through. I've got a bunch of bookshelves downstairs, and I'll find myself going through and pulling the ones out. I'm like, all right, these I got to make room for new ones, and the the fiction ones always are the first ones out the door, like the history ones and the biographies. Like I've got my art biographies, and then I've got my my Western histories and stuff like that, and World War II history and everything. But the fictions, you're always like, oh, all right, you're going out in the box on the curb for somebody to come by and pick up. I don't like, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I still hang on to stuff that I studied in school, fiction wise.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, other than that, it's gone.
It's gone. So what's okay? I'm going to ask you a question. What am I missing on the professional wrestling scene?
I watched the WWE has its own network.
Yeah.
The rest, yeah. Um, and I love the little documentaries they make. And one of them was
Okay.
about Pat Patterson, who recently passed away, and one of the head honchos there. But it starts with him the first time he saw wrestling,
Hmm.
and he's a little boy, and he goes to the arena, and he's just mesmerized. I don't know that everybody has that experience. For me, it was I didn't see it live, but when I saw it on TV, we had just moved to Texas. I was born in Chicago, and
Okay.
I was 4, but it it was that moment, and
Okay.
I think some people have that moment and others don't, and that's usually who's confused by the appeal.
I mean, they're
the
amazing athletes. I mean, especially the stuff they're doing nowadays is insane. That when when I'm flipping through channels and
yeah,
one of the programs will come on and just like that's insane. That just the aerobatics and stuff that they're doing. I'm like, that's crazy. But for some reason, as a kid, and it was definitely in my should have been in my wheelhouse as a kid because I was at that age where I would have been very, you know, impacted by it, but it never set in with me for some reason.
I guess I've had various connections to it. As a photographer, I photographed independent wrestling for a little bit, and these were like
Okay.
flea market shows.
It's,
And I remember the most powerful instance in that experience was this guy, his gimmick was the kind of the $1 million man. He's
uh-huh.
the rich guy and the bad guy in the show. And I'd been documenting them for a while at that point. And so I kind of knew the guys, and I was like, "Hey man, how's it going?" I remember he would, I think, drive in from Austin for this show to wrestle in front of 4 people. And he's like, "Man," it's like, "I'm all right." He's like, "Lost my job today." And then he gets into the rich man character, and that's what wrestling is like. Things like the Ultimate Warrior, they're just playing these superheroes, but they're people. We can see that they're people, and
Yeah.
that just that type of imagination, I don't know, it just mesmerizes me. So still,
Yeah. And
it's
there's
weird, and it's weird. I stopped apologizing about it because there's plenty of other people that feel the same way.
um,
but
uh,
it used to be kind of like a guilty pleasure, like yeah, because Mr. Literature here, is
oh,
watching people like hit each other in the head with chairs. So
no, I mean and there's such a history to it now because it has survived for
Mhm.
as long as it has, and it has become a huge industry on top of
I
it.
think, yeah, no, it's uncanny, but I think the other connection is I feel a connection to these guys' lives.
Hmm.
I've been I've been a working artist since I was 18, and
Okay.
I my life has felt like a carnival oftentimes.
Yeah.
The just the traveling, the opportunities that I've gotten, because of what I do, and
Hmm.
just being different
Yeah, they're
than
choosing
I guess.
something completely out of the norm. Um,
Yeah, and
just
that's been my life too. So I kind of I feel a kinship in that way.
yeah, no, that's great.
I
Yeah, I
remember.
just
Oh, go
it
ahead.
never. I was the same with like video games.
Yeah.
Like I for and my brother who's 3 years younger than me, was got into video games and stuff and like playing video games, and there were I don't know there's like that little window if it doesn't like get into your psyche, um, you kind of
Yeah. Video games, I just I didn't like that they took up so much time. So it's like I'd rather read a book or paint
yeah
or I don't know, learn to play guitar. Um,
yeah.
and I didn't feel enriched by it. I liked it, and I liked my brother. He likes them, and he's younger than me.
Okay.
But I like playing with him once in a while. But I don't want to. I don't want to be addicted to a game. I'd rather be
I
addicted to other stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, like
It's been,
the wrestling I've managed to incorporate into my art. So
yeah.
um so it's cool. And yeah.
So how do the baseball players figure into your work?
I mean, I paint whatever I want.
Okay.
And the baseball play I had actually had an aversion to him because I had a friend who he did way before it became a thing because the Topps baseball company put out the series, and they're actively putting it out where artists remake their baseball cards. So that
Oh,
caused kind of an explosion in that
Huh.
genre.
I had no
And
idea.
yeah, and it happened right as the pandemic, like right before that, those cards came out. And
Okay.
I had already actually I started the series as the pandemic was starting because I was just looking for that nostalgia. And I remembered collecting baseball cards and just loving that. And um so it felt good to paint 'em. Kind of what you described with the cowboys.
Yeah.
I mean, that was my childhood. I still have a collection from childhood, and it was funny
Okay.
because my parents are moving, and so I'm seeing these cards, and I'm looking at these collections I put together. I'm like, oh my god, this is my youth, and like how neat, you know? It
Yeah.
so that's where that came from, and I would collect mainly baseball, but I had other sports like football,
Okay.
hockey, but but yeah, that's where that came from. And then I just love that community of artists that are working in the genre.
Hmm.
They're so friendly. They're some of the friendliest artists that I've ever interacted with. Um,
Oh, the
just
guys that are.
so supportive of each other.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, what really just immersed me in it was when we did a virtual show, and it's ongoing, the effort, but it raises money for the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City.
Okay. Yeah. I think, yeah,
And
I saw some of your pieces that were up on your Instagram referencing back
yeah,
to that for the auctions and stuff.
yeah, but yeah, I've just really grown an affection for that genre. It's like it's cool. I think pop art in general has that appeal that, and I love that idea that of using exploring an art form that you know connects us more quickly. Um, just like your cowboys, I I love that stuff. I remember I visited Arizona. I'm trying to remember the little towns where all the shootouts happened in
There was, yeah,
the old
there's
west.
we used to, yeah, Tombstone is probably the most famous one
Tombstone,
down.
yeah.
Yeah, down like on the
So
Mexican border.
I went all that highway down to the very last place I could go.
Yeah,
Just soaking it in, you know, and 'cause I don't know if it was like watching movies when I grew up that but I was just fascinated.
we
So
used to have a place out in when we moved to Arizona when I was 6 years old, and there was there's one in Tucson. It's called Old Tucson, and it was where they would actually shoot a lot of the Western movies, and it built one of those the towns with like the saloons, and and they used
yeah,
it for a number of movies. um had the Western, main street set up where they'd have the shootouts in the street and stuff like that, and it became a tourist attraction after they stopped filming the old westerns there. And we used to have one in out in Scottsdale, and it was called Rawhide. And you would and my parents would take us there like once a year, and we drive out. It was out in the middle of the desert at the time. Now it's been surrounded by developments and everything. But we would drive out there, and it felt like you were just driving out into the middle of nowhere. And they had one of those anatromic uh, stage coaches at the front with the old cowboys sitting around the wagons in the circle, and it'd be like the robots would move, like flipping the frying pan, and
yeah,
they tell like a Western story. And then,
that's like heaven to me. What you're describing, it's like I
and then like
I'm
on the hour, at every hour, they'd have like everyone would like get off the side of the main dirt road in the Western town, and they'd have the shootout, for the tourists and
Yeah.
stuff. And it was like we looked forward every time we'd go to Rawhide. We're like, oh my gosh, we're going to Rawhide and we're going to ride the stagecoach and we're going to pan for gold. And it was, we're going to dress up as cowboys and get our Western pictures taken, the old timey. It was always a blast. So, like you said, there's something
Yeah,
about.
I'm a little kid about all that. And the more, I don't know, the more we talk, the more I realize partly it's I have my 5-year-old and the 4-year-olds. And so most of my daylight, all of my daylight is from 8 to 9 p.m. or so is just me and the kids.
Okay.
And so I think just having that youth around me is making me look backwards at all the things that I like, um,
Yeah.
and and even admiring. Like I you don't know how obsessed I am with your work. Like I look forward to what's next. It's one of my favorite feeds. So I'm so
Okay.
happy that you're here to
Yeah. Well,
yeah
thanks.
to help me understand why. but but
I,
aside, yeah.
I think I'm a little bit along the same lines as you are, where I've kind of developed my own little style and way of painting, but now I just paint whatever I want, whether it's a cowboy or an old Godzilla toy, or
Yeah.
sometimes I'll just like type in on the phone, vintage classic toys, and just like scroll through until I see something I want to, that kind of just strikes me, the imagery, and paint it. Which makes it fun for me. People are always like, "Oh my God, you paint so much," and I'm like, "Well, because I'm painting just whatever I want to paint,
Yeah.
instead of going, okay, I'm just going to paint landscapes or I'm just going to paint cowboys." I'm just
You know,
painting
that
whatever
is
I
the
want to
ticket.
paint.
Because I'm prolific as well, but it's because I do get commissions and things like that, but it's always I don't accept something if it goes too off my radar. If
Yeah,
I'm not into what you want, um, or oftentimes if I don't know you too well, I won't I won't take the commission. Um, because they yeah, they'll often take me a while if they're it just depends. But yeah, I think that's so key though. Or, or that's how I appreciate art is like just doing what you want, you know?
yeah,
Um,
it's definitely a a balancing act for sure, because I mean, you do want to, it's nice to be able to support yourself making art.
yeah.
And there's always a business commercial aspect to it. um
The the
and
thing a friend of mine taught me early on is building inventory. It seems like you do that. That's a great thing. Because that's my model. And then your your inventory kind of becomes it feels like passive income
yeah,
because
I mean, I have I've got like just stacks of
yeah,
paintings. Like I said, I do everything on paper. um and First of all, it's inexpensive, and it kind of, for me at least, it gets me out of that head space of, okay, this is a $30 canvas, or this is a, you know y- a $20 tube of acrylic paint or something. It gets me out of that head space where I can kind of just, you know not worry about that part of it.
yeah,
And then it also doesn't take up a lot of space once it's done.
yeah,
um you paint a lot on the smaller canvases,
yeah,
and those, I mean, those will stack up real quick.
yeah.
And start taking.
They can, but I really push them. So
You
I
build
don't.
up your, I like the way you build up your layers, for sure. How long do you usually work on a piece?
It depends. Sometimes I look like y- I look up and it's done.
Uh-huh.
Um, Other times I'm not that lucky. it, I have to I have to, come back to it, come back to it, come back. The thing is, I have at least 30 pieces going at one time.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's not yeah. I
It's hard
think
to
on
keep. Yeah.
paper I work the quickest just because I think it's a different mindset working on paper.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah. Like,
I just because I feel like, man, okay, that one's done. And that doesn't happen on canvas all the time, but on paper for me it does.
yeah, because
So
it's easy just to rip it out of the notebook and just put it put it to the side. Um and I
I
I actually when I was cleaning carpets, we would clean area rugs, and we had these big spools of craft paper that once the rugs were cleaned, we'd wrap them in that to deliver them back to the houses. So that's why I people are like, what do you where are you finding this paper you paint on? I'm like, well, go clean carpets for 10 years. That's where you find it. But I would take so I would take the paper because we had these huge, 6 foot rolls of this craft paper, and I would take it, and before we go out to go when we leave the warehouse, before we go out to work for the day, I would unroll like a big segment of it and fold it up, and then I would dump the rest of the coffee from the coffee pot in there to kind of make the paper look old and let it dry. And then I've actually used brown paper bags also
yeah,
that I paint
yeah.
on. And out here we have leaf bags, they're called, because we, every fall everyone starts raking their leaves and putting on the side. So we have these giant, like 4 foot tall paper bags that I used to go to the grocery store and just cut those across the seams and just make them into giant sheets of paper, and then just start painting
I,
on top of those.
I love those brown bag ones that you do. I am. I've worked on shopping bags before, but it's a good look. But it looks especially good in your style.
Thanks.
Yeah,
I the When I started doing the paper ones with like the coffee and stuff, my 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 whole idea was, and this goes back to the all the nostalgia, and we would go. My grandparents are from Illinois, and they're from a little town called Wakanda that's like northwest of Chicago, and they lived on a lake out there. So we would go and spend our summers with my grandparents on the lake. Um, and they had a cottage in the back of their house that was like the catch-all for the mowing machine. But up in top of the cottage was where my my mom's siblings, all their stuff was stashed and boxed from when they were kids, was up in the top of the cottage, all the old comic books and records and stuff like that, because they didn't throw that stuff away. They boxed it up and just put it away. So I loved going up there and seeing what I could find in the boxes. So when I started doing the big pieces, they're always folded up, and that they look old, and they're supposed to look that way because I always kind of equated it, of you would be just going through a like I was be going through my grandma's attic basically, and open up a box and find these posters in there or whatever they might be. So I always kind of was like, okay, people are like, oh my god, the paper's folded, it looks old, it's beat up. I'm like, well, that's kind of the idea. It's like if you found like a big circus poster or something in your grandma's attic, you're like,
yeah,
this
yeah.
is cool. So I was trying to
Well, you
create something
yeah.
along those lines to kind of go with that nostalgic feel of
You were talking about like my use of layers, and that's what that is. Especially, I think when that gelled was I showed this was right before I quit painting or quit photography. I was using Photoshop to make these images, and
Okay.
so I went to this it's called Photo Fest, and there was curators and things would do critiques. And actually, I think he was from a museum here in Fort Worth, the Amon Carter Museum. And so when he looked at what I was doing, he said, "What you're doing, it's archaeology." And it was true. I was doing that in Photoshop. I was making those layers. So
Uh-huh.
when I really aggressively started painting, I always kept that in the back of my head that these um that I wanted that archaeology. Um I wanted it to look old and grungy and
Yeah.
like it had been through something. Um and yeah, that's like your brown bag pieces feel that way. Especially it's cool.
Well, thanks. Yeah, that
It's cool.
yeah,
It's
that
cool to
was I'm glad I'm glad you think that's that they look that way because that's what the whole intention was. I can remember because I would just come home from work and paint, and then on the weekends I would just like stay up as late as I could. Um, and the neighbors would because the neighbors would be like they would wake up in the morning, there'd just be like paintings laying all over the yard, like drying in the front yard. These big giant paintings of like gunslingers and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, I've been up
I
all night painting. Yeah.
the neighbors.
The good old neighbors. Well, it's funny because
The
we live.
That's
I
so funny. It reminds me of so I get this I have this it's a commission. I get kind of yearly. I'm very fortunate, but I paint these big skulls. They're made out of they're like big plastic skulls, and it's for a liquor company. So this year, the corporate people always put off like doing their work on time, and so they hit me up. I was just waiting for them to tell me when I was going to paint them so we could coordinate that. And so they said on a Wednesday they were like, "We have 16 of these giant skulls. Can you have them by Saturday?" I said, "Okay, sure." And so they brought them in a van, and they were all over my backyard. And I'll never forget the neighbor's face when she lets her dogs out, and there I am spray painting and messing with. No, it was 16 skulls.
how big are these things?
I want to say
No
what
worries.
were we talking about?
I don't know. I got to see some of the stuff behind you though.
Okay.
The the Star Wars paintings that were behind you.
Yeah, well, it's fun, like we were describing books, how you go through a fiction phase and all that. And I do that with the artwork. Um because the first kind of real pop art I did were record covers.
Okay,
And I have a separate account for that, El Santos Vinyl.
I didn't
And
even know that.
I would yeah, I learned to compartmentalize when I put out stuff in social media
Okay,
because like I have a separate wrestling account.
okay.
It,
Well, I see the
so
wrestling stuff show up on I guess the
well,
baseball one that.
you see some of it because it's starting to become fusion. Like I'll take a baseball card design, and the card companies had started doing this, but I started doing it, and so if it's a baseball card design, I'll float it on
Okay,
the baseball thing, and they're responsive to it. But I think if I were to just put the hardcore wrestling portraits on there, it'd be a little muddled.
yeah,
So, and that's all. It's weird, I think when you're making things, you just want to sell things, especially when you first start this journey. but like the last year, I've really focused on marketing, and like lately, I feel like the marketing and all of that, just the exchange, especially with people online, um, it's kind of becoming part of the art to me. I do these
It's
videos where I'll talk and I'll ask for suggestions, and I'm getting suggestions, and then those suggestions come to life.
okay.
And yeah, I think that's pretty neat.
Yeah,
Uh,
I did do I did a painting like that where I started and I was asking people, just tell me what you want to see on the painting. Um, and I got like 20 responses or something, and I started down the line, and most of the stuff was in the wheelhouse. But I started getting some, just some random ones, which is always good because it kind of pushes you out of your comfort zone to see, what something that you normally wouldn't paint would kind of look like in your style. But
I love that. Like I love that button being pushed, and that's
yeah,
part of why I started asking for suggestions, because I think it's neat. It's like, well, I wouldn't have painted that, but
yeah,
okay. And then um, sometimes that triggers other pieces.
I, yeah. It's crazy how I'd gotten away from just kind of, and you've seen the little scrap pieces that I've been painting on now. When I'm mailing out artwork, I print the stuff up, the mailing label, and I've had the little half sheet of paper from the printer that I cut up, and so
Yeah,
I've started just keeping that stack like next to me on the desk, and just doing quick little things, and it's interesting to see, and for a long time, I think artists tend to do this. They'll get so focused on like doing like a baseball card painting or a cowboy piece, or whatever it is that they're accustomed to, that you you forget to explore different things,
yeah.
and just taking like that 10-15 minutes to be like, oh, something pops in your head, just to grab the sheet of paper. Some people are way better at just having a sketchbook on them all the time and doodling things, and just exploring different tangents that pop into their head. um so my problem is sometimes I'll just be like, I'll just get so into like working in a sketchbook that it will just take me away from making a painting, like a bigger painting that I've been working on, and I'll be like, oh, there went the whole day, just kind of going through which isn't a bad thing, at
Yeah, I
all.
think it's necessary, it I think as artists, it's important for us to maintain our happiness,
Yeah,
because it's only then that we can really truly be free to create. And
yeah,
I think taking a tangent like that is like taking a breath. So,
exactly. Yeah, I don't know if this has happened to you. When we moved out here, my like I said, I was working during the day, to make money to pay bills and everything, and then I was painting in the evenings. And the the art market has changed so much over the past 20 years. um the only place that used to be available pretty much to us was galleries to show and sell art. um and then it kind of went a little bit into like coffee houses and stuff, and it started to broaden a little bit. But then with social media, it just, I mean, it
yeah.
broadened it. It changed the landscape for all art forms, from
Is that
writing to.
primarily how you yeah, is that primarily how you show?
No, I have a I've got like three galleries I show with. um
Okay.
And then but then you also when you get into like the business side of art and everything, because galleries don't want you to be selling your stuff online,
Right.
because a lot of times a gallery takes a certain percentage of it. They want they don't want you to be underselling them. um
Yeah.
Basically, it's the same problem that like the Barnes and Nobles has. You can go to the Barnes and Nobles and then you see people literally on Amazon ordering the book for 20% less while they're in the
See, I
bookstore.
that it's what got me away from galleries, because that's how I started. Because back in the day, that's what you did, is
Yeah.
you looked for a gallery, they repped you. But um, it I constantly say it. It felt like the least creative time in my artist career,
Yeah.
like dealing that way. And there was restrictions, and I didn't like feeling like I was owned. Um,
It's yeah, it's and but it's a business also, that they have bills to pay and stuff, so they want artists that are going to
yeah,
be selling. So, but like you said, if they're selling, whenever you have a show with them, if you're lucky enough to get like a one person show or a two-person show with a gallery, and they sell $10,000 worth of work, they got to keep their lights on too. So
yeah.
if you come to them and say, hey, remember last year I did cowboy paintings and it did really well, here's a stack of Star Wars paintings, and they're like, hey, we got to pay the bills, man. So it does, it's definitely a juggling act. And it's
Yeah.
really easy to get pigeonholed and burned out real quick with a within a gallery setting, I guess you could say. um
What's really interesting to me is, have you heard of NFT art?
no.
N-
uh,
I won't try to explain it because I'm still trying to decipher it. And I think
okay,
I
what
want to
does
understand it, and then I want to make some videos dumbing it down for people like me.
okay, so I've never even heard of this.
Well, like there's cryptocurrency,
Okay.
right? So already art has been, they've started to exchange it, like, in this crypto world.
No, I know. I just saw. D- do you follow Damien Hirst on Instagram?
No. Uh,
The big British
yeah,
artist that did the
yeah. Okay, I thought, yeah, I
yeah,
was
that
like,
did the big
the
shark
artist?
in the formaldehyde shark. He just put
I
out like a set of paintings. He's like, we're now accepting cryptocurrency for artwork.
Mhm.
This might be along the same lines of what you're talking about. I don't. So good. Sorry,
Yeah,
I
well,
interrupted you.
there is selling the actual pieces, but then there's creating, I'm still trying to decipher it. It seems like you could create the actual piece and then these digital forms of it, and those could be additions.
Uh huh.
And so when people buy those, every time they sell it, you set up a royalty and you keep getting paid. Which that type of stuff has never happened for artists. It's
No,
pretty
because
huge. So
yeah.
yeah, I'm studying, I'm really, really paying attention, and trying to get my limited mind to understand it. And I'm about to jump into it because it's I think it's the future. And
So is it almost like say
it's weird, isn't it?
it's like the like a royalty, like if you sell your image to use for like a t-shirt or something, and you would get
in
every time
this
they sell a t-shirt you get $1 from it or something like that.
in this instance, just like the cryptocurrency, and I still
Uh-huh.
struggle to understand that, but you have this token,
Uh-huh.
and so the ledger is there for everyone anyone can look at it and
Okay.
tell whose token that is.
Okay.
When you sell the digital piece, it's like that, and it has value, and people are already, it's gaining interest, like collectibles.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
artists are starting to get into it, and
Okay.
yeah, I want to be in front because
I'd like to
yeah, I don't want to sleep on it because it's super fascinating. First of all, but that idea of royalties, that um man, that'd be awesome. I
yeah,
just
I
think
don't
about the number of pieces I have out in the world, and I'll never see royalties on that. But
no.
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I know that. Well, what's so interesting with like the social media is it provides literally like an avenue for. I mean, there it we went through like a traditional. It sounds like you went kind of through the same kind of schooling I went through. A traditional. You go to college, you go to art school. They teach you how to put together your slide sheet and your bio and stuff, and you mail it out to galleries in your area, or or in other states, trying to get someone to represent you. Um, and I would have never thought when I was like 25 years old that I would have been able to make a living off of art like that. And now there's literally younger artists that are able to make a living at off of artwork without having to go to art school, or that were just you know doing. It's
Yeah.
a whole different market that's opening up for them. I mean, I would have been thrilled 20 years ago sitting in my basement after work painting and being able to shoot images out to a couple thousand people, because I was just sitting there and waiting for a gallery to say, oh yeah, we'll show it in next March. And you're like, that's a
Yeah,
long way off.
I got hip to that pretty quickly. I remember social. I was reluctant to get on social media. Like, I think 2009, I opened a Facebook account because my
Okay.
sister said you could really network what you do,
Hmm.
and that I'm like, okay, you got my attention, and she was right. I I've yeah, I've not looked back. It's
That's great. Yeah.
and what you're describing, the younger people having access to. The thing is, we get to benefit from that too, even though we're
Yeah.
not youngsters. But um, I mean, if anything, I think it probably has given more power to older artists.
Well, I think it
Whereas,
yeah, for sure. I think it definitely keeps you engaged more. And because you talked about the immediacy of like writing, you weren't getting enough of an immediate. It took so long to make a finished product. We want that, we crave that. That acceptance, or that reaction from our artwork. And so it keeps it kind of keeps you moving along, because I painted for like 10 years, where I was just painting every single night, and then just one night I was like, I can't paint another cowboy. And I stopped for 5 years, and went and
wow,
did something completely different, and didn't literally did not pick up a paintbrush for like 5 years, because I was done. I was like painting the same thing over and over again. It felt like, and I was going to the same reference material. Um, and I just had gotten burned out on it completely. But and then I think I started doing the social media stuff about five years ago. Um,
yeah,
and like you said, you can go a long way with it. It's a whole different beast in itself. It takes a it
well, I
it
think
takes
it changes the ball game. there's a one of my favorite books on art was I really should memorize the title, but it's something like The Galleries and Why They Don't Want Your Artwork. And and it really broke it down. And I was talking about older artists. It said as far as like museum, that high-end gallery game,
Hmm.
they're like in the book it pretty much outlines how past a certain age, and I think that was true at the time it was written. You just aren't getting there. You know, you can, it's rare. Um, but when I think about social media, I think about this conversation we're recording. I think about all the ways that we can document as artists what we do. We are the most cap like documented artists in all of time at this point. No one has the ability to document at the scale that we do. Nobody's had that in the past. And
Yeah.
moving forward, we are in the archives. And so who gets into a canon might look very different. You may
Yeah. For
make it for different reasons. The way you innovated to use this space, it might become more complex. Who gets um that recognition? Not that it matters to me. I always figure I'm going to be dead anyway. That's why I do what I want. um
yeah.
I'm not worried about it. I'm worried about creating now, and um you know making my kids life good
Yeah.
with what I do, and setting the example that no matter what you want to do, no one can tell you you can't, because your dad um painted like he was drunk, and sold that to people.
Yeah.
and that's and that's how you were raised. So you can do whatever you want. It's a matter of principle at this point.
Yeah. I mean, it go it's to that point. What you're talking about is it's still it's still work. Um, and like you said, I did some album work for a band, and when they came through town, I went and I sat down. They're like, come out, see the show, and then I hung out with them and everything, and you know, there's people lined up to see them, in the afternoon before they go out and play and stuff like that. And the reality of the situation is this is a job, right? And
Yeah.
if you don't work at it, you're not going to be good at it. If you don't have the discipline to sit down and create the music and go out and tour, or if you don't have the discipline to sit down and paint every day and make the artwork, it not that it's not enjoyable. It's great that we have the luxury to be able to to do this, but like you said, you still have to work hard at it, and you still have to make a living at whatever it is you choose to do. And it's great that we've been given these different avenues to be able to make a living at it, many more than what we had 20, 30 years ago. Like you said, if you wanted to make it a living at art, you might have to go work at an ad agency, and draw up storyboards for commercials, or you might have to go take photos of weddings every weekend, to pay the bills and support your family. Um, and but it still gets back down to the bare the bare essentials of you got to sit down and put the work in, or else you're not going to reap the benefits of it. I sat with those guys. They were driving from city to city on a tour bus, and they were getting up, in the next town, doing a sound check, setting everything up. They're like, hey, I look where I can go for a run, get a good cup of coffee, and then they play that night. And it's a grind. It all
Yeah.
is a grind, but it's great that we get to do what we do. But it's still it still is work, and if you don't put in the time, you're not going to get anything out of it. That sounds a little.
It it reminds me of so I graduated from college, my bachelor's, and I got a job at a photography studio. It was
Okay.
my last 9 to 5. So I worked darkroom and I
Okay.
did the lighting. And so the photographer lady, I had just started. And so I went with her to assist on a shoot she was doing. And so in the car, she she says, "Well, so what do you want to do like with, you know, your photography?" I was like, "Well, I want to continue to do what I do, but have my own studio." And she said, "Well, it's really hard." And I could feel my mom's upbringing in me when I was like, "Well," I'm like, you know, um, being a janitor and showing up to work and clocking in and cleaning and then clocking out and doing that every day, that's hard.
Yeah.
Going to school to study to be a doctor, staying up all night, it's hard. Like everything's hard, even working anything. It's a
Yeah.
so I'm just picking what I want to do. And
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
everything. It's even if you're doing something because it's more comfortable, because you need that emotional stability of every Friday I get this paycheck and I have
Yeah.
insurance. That's hard. It's hard to make that commitment and live with it.
Yeah.
And so it boils down to choice. And yeah, nothing aside from being a bum, maybe. But even that's hard because that's a rough life. Being homeless is hard. Because where's your
That
next
is.
meal come from? Am I going to get into the shelter tonight? It, and in that, yeah, and that's, I don't know, I've probably taken this too meta, but
No, it's
but
no. I mean, I,
it's
I agree with you
yeah,
100%. Like I'll be painting, and I'm like, okay, I need to finish this painting, eh, because that's what I need to do. I need to either finish it for a show or to post it for sale on the shop, because that's how I'm paying the bills. And then I'll be like, oh man, oh it's 3 o'clock. Do I want to paint for another 2 hours? And then I'll just have to go. Oh, or I could be cleaning carpets till 4 o'clock when I would normally get off.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's a job, and I'd rather be here with the dogs at the house and doing what I actually like doing instead of.
yeah, yeah. It's awesome. It um. So I'm curious. I'm going to backtrack a little bit
All right.
because so you have gallery representation,
Yeah.
but you have your website where you sell. So
Yes.
how do you work that deal? Um,
Like I said, that that gets tricky,
yeah,
because that is a balancing act. I generally try to keep the paintings that are going to galleries like a little more larger scale paintings. Um, eh, Kind of my philosophy on art is I'd like to have something for everybody. I don't think art should be inaccessible to to people whatsoever. I think if you
yeah,
enjoy an artist, that you should be able to buy something for $50 of theirs, whether it's a small print or maybe a small original. Um, I, I think it's something
I guess the more
that
direct, yeah, I guess the more direct question is like, do you make an agreement with the gallery or
Yeah, yeah, the galleries, yeah, I mean, you've galleries usually take a cut of what you
but as far I
what you
guess because
sell.
my experience, they didn't want me doing anything else. And that's where I was like, I'll see you later.
Yeah, yeah, I haven't had that issue. I show with
Well, that's
Yard
good.
Dog in Austin, and you know how it is. They're like, "Oh, you sell," sometimes they're like, they'll mention something, "Oh, you sell your stuff so cheap online." And I'm like, "Okay, I mean, if we want to part ways, we can part ways." That
Okay. Yeah.
I've been selling stuff through them for 15 plus years, and uh, it is a juggling act. But there's so many different like venues now that are selling art. Um, like I'm showing with a group in Hu- Houston. I'm pretty sure it's Houston, and they have like a furniture showroom, and they put on art shows, um, every month, just like a gallery would. Um, but she's an interior designer, and he's a designer. I mean, people have branched out into people in the creative field have branched out into so many different venues.
Yeah.
It's great, and there's so many opportunities out there for everyone to participate in the art economy, if you want to put it, in that way. There's just so many. And even being on social media, I'm sure you get it too. You'll get people coming to you, "Hey, I'm working on this project, I've seen your stuff, I think it would be a good fit," and you might sell them a few paintings, or do a couple commission pieces for them. So there, there- there's there's so many opportunities out there. And I'm not a blue chip artist or anything like that, where I could see a gallery saying, "Hey, we're selling your paintings for $10,000 to $20,000, at your art shows. You can't be selling stuff." At some point, if you get to that level, I'm sure a gallery, but you also
And I
have
guess
some
I
bar.
guess that's where I was at. So
Yeah, I
that's
think there's.
that's
I,
where I that's where I started to put up tents and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do my own thing.
yeah, because like.
Strangely, I make more money. I or because yeah, I was doing some really cool shows, but then between things being digital and just that whole exchange with the galleries, I remember walking down to a market actually in Houston that they would do first Saturday,
Okay.
and there was my art friend that I really admired his work. I loved um, his work and T.D. Snyder, and he was just out there selling artwork, and it was chill. He'd pack up his stuff, go back home, and come back the next month,
Uh-huh.
and so that's what I started doing. And people are like, "Have you lost your mind?" And like, yeah, maybe, but like I remember that first show. It was just that was my 10 by 10 space. I would talk to people. I started to use social media. I upped.
Just give me.
Oh
I
yeah.
gotta let one of these dogs to go
Okay.
downstairs. Hold on, just one second. All right, we've got 7 dogs.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So we.
you know, I'm trying to remember when I was a kid. I convinced my parents to get me 7 dogs because we had a break in at the house.
Okay.
So I used this emotional occurrence to get them to get me 7 dogs. It didn't last very long. They were like, you know what, we have to break up the gang. That's
I'm
funny.
sorry. So you were talking about you
Yeah.
were. So were you doing like the art
Oh,
fairs and stuff like that then?
well, before that, I had been, in the galleries. But when I first started in college, I was doing it was kind of a return to it, but I was doing
Uh huh.
parking lot shows, and then I started to do gallery stuff. And then yeah, feeling myself like burned out, just not liking the atmosphere of it. And that was my personal experience. But yeah, I was like, well, I'm gonna change mediums. I'm gonna paint. I'm going to like put up a little tent, and um this is what I'll do.
Yeah.
And then yeah, and then that went well. Like, in Houston, I got to a point where I had my own studio with like half an acre of land.
Okay.
And that's yeah, and that really opened my eyes. And it's still, I'm glad it all went down that way, because it constantly, I feel like the business side is evolving. I probably
Okay.
I probably got there by getting beaten in the face, but but at least it sunk in. And um yeah, I like where things are heading for me, and just artists in general. I feel like we're all pretty empowered. And so much of that is social media, so much of it is technology, and
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what's next. So
Well, it's the cryptocurrency, like you said.
it that it and I'll be researching and sharing as I decipher that. um I've got a friend that seems pretty knowledgeable of it, but he speaks like computer code, and I'm like, man, I need you to draw me a picture or something,
I need a flow chart of what you're
or
talking
just
about.
give it to me in emojis, or I don't know, like
Yeah. Well,
I don't
I
like
because
or I'm going to learn calculus. I don't know. Um,
well, because you were in the photography field, and I can
yeah,
remember galleries were having like photo shows of photographers, and they were selling an edition of like 20 of them, and they weren't even selling that. They were just shipping the digital file to the collectors. So you would
yeah.
buy like, they would sell edition of 20, and you'd be like, here's my money. And they're like, all right, we're shipping you the file. You go have it printed up by a professional printer. So it's crazy how much it has changed in the
Yeah.
past 20 years for
No,
sure.
it will continue to. Um, hey man, thanks for coming on. I feel like I kept you I kept you past my promised 40 minutes,
No,
but
it's all right. Like I said, I don't. I,
it's always great to uh, especially when I'm captivated by work, to
well,
get this
thank
other
you. Yeah,
dimension of a person.
it
So,
was it was fun. I don't, and this is on me a little bit. I finally found some artists in the neighborhood here. It took me 20 years to find like the two guys that were painting in the neighborhood. But like when we moved from Arizona, I had like a group of friends, that we had all grown up together and were, had all kind of gone down the art path together that we'd sit around and talk about art with and everything. And I moved out here and I literally had nobody um, to talk about art. This is such a political town, there's not a lot of of art people in my neighborhood. Like I said, I did eventually find the couple folks that were into art. So I always love
I think
talking about art.
it's important. Yeah, I had the same experience. I lived in Houston most of my life. I moved there when I was 4, and then 2016 I moved to these parts, and I didn't know anybody. And
Okay.
but now that's kind of weird to say, because it seems like I know everybody.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. So
But
how long have you been in the Fort Worth area then, or I know that's not where
Yeah,
you are.
like 4 years
Oh,
or
okay.
no, five,
So
5 now. Yeah.
okay, I came out there. the The Fort Worth Art Museum had the Luciano Freud show at the museum, and it was like for some reason it went from like the Tate, and then it went to L.A., and then it showed up at the Fort Worth Art Museum. And my dad's a huge like Freud fan of his paintings, so we flew out there, and I'd never been to Fort Worth, and I, we stayed downtown, and we went to see the show and everything, and then we went out to dinner in like downtown Fort Worth. And what's the building with like the giant angels on the front of it? I don't that They might not be angels, but they're
I
like these
don't know.
huge things like playing a trumpet or something. I was blown away by downtown Fort Worth. I was like, wow, this is a
It's pretty. I haven't yeah, I became a father like around once I became a father, I just didn't get out much. And so it's yeah, the way I kept the art socialization alive was there's a nonprofit I got in with and organizing gallery shows. And
uh-huh.
so when people ask me what shows have you seen, I'm like, well, the ones I've produced. But yeah, I know that the downtown's pretty, but I'm not familiar with the buildings.
I was like, wow, that is
Yeah,
a crazy looking building. Yeah, it was good. Yeah, I flew in for the weekend to see that show, which was a really cool show.
yeah.
Um, but
There's some really good museums here. Es- Especially, I think the one I did see when I first got here. I was I only had the one, the boy and my stepdaughter, and at the time, and so it was a western show, and it was how it was. I can't remember the artist, but I remember just loving the work.
yeah,
Um,
isn't there a Frederick Remington Museum downtown Fort Worth? I think so. I could.
I know that was the I want to say it was the Amon Carter, but yeah, that I just know that I've seen flyers for a lot of shows. I just don't get to see them.
You just. Uh,
But
all right,
they'll grow up and we'll be able to go together. But but
you got
anyways,
a
hey,
little.
check out Fort Guerin's work. WV Guerin, GUERIN .bigcartel.com, and his Instagram at WV Guerin, and get as fixated with it as I am. So, hey man, thanks again. Thank you for your
Yeah, of
time.
course.
I
Yeah, it was fun,
appreciate
man.
it, and hope to bring you back. See what else you see if you've joined the crypto world by then.
I I'm gonna do a deep dive into the crypto world once we get off.
crypto crypto outlaw work.
Yes.
I want to see it. All
Come
right.
on.
Well, thank
All right,
you.
man.
I'll see you next time.
All right, sounds good, buddy.
Bebop. Bebop.